You might picture America's youngest elected president dining on sophisticated French cuisine and expensive champagne, but JFK's actual eating habits reveal a man who preferred New England comfort food and had some surprisingly picky tendencies. From his childhood seafood obsessions to his notorious sweet tooth, Kennedy's daily diet was less Camelot glamour and more Boston blue blood with very specific tastes. And if you think his elegant public image matched what he actually put on his plate, you're in for some revelations. The breakfast. He rarely skipped. According to former White House staff, Kennedy started most mornings with a fairly consistent breakfast routine. 2 boiled eggs, crisp bacon, toast with marmalade, and orange juice made up his standard morning meal. The president preferred his eggs cooked for exactly 4 minutes, not 3, not 5, and would send them back to the kitchen if they weren't prepared to his specifications. For what it's worth, Kennedy also frequently requested a glass of milk with breakfast, a habit he'd maintained since childhood. His preference for milk over coffee in the morning surprised many visitors, considering the era's heavy coffee drinking culture. The New England clam chowder obsession, JFK's love for New England clam chowder, bordered on legendary. The president requested this soup so frequently that White House chefs kept a constant supply ready. According to René Verdon, Kennedy's French chef, the president would eat clam chowder at least 3 to 4 times per week. Now, that sounds like someone who knew exactly what he wanted and wasn't afraid to stick with it. Kennedy was particular about his chowder, too. It had to be made the traditional Massachusetts way, with cream and potatoes. Manhattan-style clam chowder with its tomato base? Absolutely not acceptable. A lunch that stayed. Simple for lunch, Kennedy typically kept things light and predictable. A bowl of fish chowder or chicken soup paired with a sandwich was his go-to combination. The sandwich was usually made with toasted bread and filled with either chicken or tuna salad. But here's where it gets interesting. Despite having access to the finest cuisine in America, JFK would often request that his lunch be served on a tray in the Oval Office so he could continue working. The meals were so routine that kitchen staff could practically prepare them without instruction. Is anyone else suddenly appreciating how relatable that lunch at your desk habit is? The dinner preferences of a seafood devotee. Given his Massachusetts upbringing, it's unsurprising that Kennedy gravitated toward seafood for dinner. Broiled fish, particularly sole, flounder, or swordfish, appeared on his plate several times per week. According to White House records, the president requested fish so often that the kitchen maintained relationships with multiple seafood suppliers to ensure freshness. Kennedy preferred his fish prepared simply, broiled with lemon and butter, minimal seasoning. As it turns out, all that fancy French cooking technique his chef had mastered, the president often passed on it in favor of straightforward New England preparation methods. That said, Kennedy wasn't exclusively a seafood eater. He also enjoyed roast chicken, lamb chops, and occasionally steak, though beef was never his first choice. Whatever the case may be, his dinners rarely featured heavy sauces or elaborate preparations. The dessert addiction. If you really want to understand JFK's eating habits, his dessert consumption will probably make you reconsider any assumptions about presidential discipline. The man had an absolutely relentless sweet tooth. According to multiple staff members, Kennedy consumed ice cream daily, and not just a small serving. His favorite flavors were vanilla and peach, and he would often request seconds. Former White House usher J.B. West recalled that Kennedy could eat an entire quart of vanilla ice cream in one sitting while watching a movie in the White House theater. Is anyone else suddenly craving ice cream? The Boston cream pie tradition. Beyond ice cream, Kennedy had a particular weakness for Boston cream pie. This wasn't surprising given his Boston roots, but the frequency with which he requested it certainly raised eyebrows among staff. The dessert appeared at White House dinners, private meals, and even some working lunches. Clearly, the president believed that being from Boston meant he had an obligation to support the city's signature dessert. Who can blame him? What he refused to eat. For all his adventurous political positions, Kennedy was surprisingly conservative when it came to certain foods. According to chef René Verdon, the president absolutely refused to eat liver in any form. He also disliked Brussels sprouts, turnips, and most organ meats. Onions were another no-go item. Kennedy requested that onions be left out of nearly every dish, even when they were traditional components. This created some challenges for Verdun, who had to adapt classic French recipes to accommodate the president's preferences. In fact, Kennedy's dislikes were so well known among kitchen staff that they maintained a detailed list to avoid any culinary mishaps during official dinners. The daiquiri ritual. When it came to cocktails, Kennedy had a clear favorite: daiquiris. According to reports from White House social events, the president enjoyed a well-made daiquiri before dinner, particularly during warm weather. His preference was for the classic version, white rum, lime juice, and simple syrup, served frozen. Perhaps more interesting is that Kennedy reportedly learned to make daiquiris himself during his Navy service and took pride in mixing them properly. At the very least, this gave him something in common with Ernest Hemingway, another daiquiri enthusiast: the restrictive medical diet. What many people don't realize is that Kennedy's food choices weren't entirely based on preference. His serious health issues, particularly his Addison's disease and chronic back problems, required careful dietary management. According to his physicians, Kennedy needed to maintain consistent blood sugar levels and avoid foods that might interfere with his medications. This medical necessity partly explains his routine eating patterns. The repetitive meals weren't just about pickiness, they were about maintaining the energy and stability he needed to function as president. Considering the enormous pressures he faced, from the Cuban Missile Crisis to the space race, maintaining physical equilibrium through predictable eating made strategic sense. The dining pace problem. Here's something that frustrated both White House chefs and dinner guests. Kennedy ate incredibly fast. Multiple sources report that the president would finish an entire meal in 15 to 20 minutes, leaving guests scrambling to keep up. Former White House Social Secretary Letitia Baldridge recalled that dinner guests often found themselves still working on their first course when Kennedy had finished his entire meal. The rapid eating pace, apparently a habit from his Navy days, never slowed down even in the formal setting of state dinners. And honestly, this probably didn't make the elaborate multi-course dinners Jacqueline Kennedy planned any easier to execute. The private versus public dining split. While official state dinners at the Kennedy White House featured elaborate French cuisine prepared by Chef Verdun, the president's private meals remained stubbornly American. This created an interesting dynamic where Kennedy would publicly serve haute cuisine to impress foreign dignitaries while privately requesting fish chowder and ice cream. According to Verdun, he initially felt frustrated by this disconnect, having been hired specifically to bring French culinary excellence to the White House. However, he eventually accepted that his elaborate creations were for guests, not the president himself. The children's menu influence. Once Caroline and John Jr. were old enough to eat with their parents, Kennedy sometimes requested that the kitchen prepare children's menu items for himself as well. Hot dogs, hamburgers, and grilled cheese sandwiches made occasional appearances at family dinners. For what it's worth, this absolutely delighted his children and horrified his wife, who had worked hard to establish the White House as a center of cultural sophistication. But Kennedy apparently saw no contradiction between being leader of the free world and enjoying a good hot dog. The travel food problem. When traveling, Kennedy's eating habits became even more challenging for his staff to manage. He wanted familiar foods even when visiting foreign countries, which meant advanced teams had to coordinate with local suppliers to ensure New England clam chowder ingredients were available in places like Paris or Vienna. Former aide Dave Powers recalled one particularly difficult trip to Ireland where Kennedy requested his standard fish chowder, forcing staff to essentially recreate a White House kitchen meal in Dublin. The president did make concessions for diplomatic purposes, but his preferred meals remained American through and through. The surprising calorie count. Despite his apparently modest food choices, nutritionists who've analyzed Kennedy's typical daily intake estimate, he consumed between 2,500 and 3,000 calories per day. That ice cream habit, combined with multiple desserts and the calorie-dense chowders, added up quickly. However, Kennedy's active lifestyle, swimming in the White House pool, walking the grounds, and his famously energetic work pace likely burned through most of those calories. His weight remained relatively stable throughout his presidency, suggesting his intake matched his activity level. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more videos about presidential food habits are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.